We are in Daf Yud Amid Base 10b, and the Gemara asked, "What happened if you have an alleyway opening that is 20 amas wide, larger than 10?" So we saw that you have to bring it narrow, make it narrower, and if it's 20, can you just split it? And the Gemara came up with a way to split it, where if you created essentially a small alleyway at the opening by having a 4 amma, which is the minimum size of an alleyway, a 4 amma long board or wall that's at least 10 tefachim high, at the midpoint between the 20-foot amma. So you have a 20 wall, a 20 opening, and you put the wall there, and so you have 2 small alleyways on either side, and that counts as opening. And now the Gemara is going to ask, well, what about, can I make that's all parallel to the walls. Can I make a perpendicular wall, and that would not be directly at the corner of the wall, but somewhere in the middle of the opening that would split the opening? And the basis for this idea is that we know that Omed Merubal Aparatz, if you have more standing than the breach, that counts as a solid wall. Meaning, let's say my courtyard is 30 by 30. So I have essentially the house and then 3 walls of 30 by 30. But I have a doorway and I have another doorway and there's a breach somewhere where the fence fell. So as long as I have, of those 90 linear feet, I have the majority standing. So let's say I had 50 feet of existent wall. So with all the windows and doors there, it's going to count as a solid wall. So the Gemara wants to do the same over here. And we're going to come up to some ideas of where that will not count. So this is the third line in. Amar Rabbi Yehuda, like Rabbi Yehuda said, if you have an alleyway that is wide 15 feet, and Rashi says the same would be true if it was wide 20, and as I'll explain. So marchik shtei amos, so leave a gap of 2 amma. So in our scenario that we've been using was that the opening is on the west side, and you have 2 long walls on the north and south side, and a shorter wall on the back end of the alleyway on the east side. And now on the west side, you're going to make a wall perpendicular to the 2 north and south sides. So it's going to come down from the north towards the south. But you're going to leave a gap at the northwest corner. You're going to leave a gap of 2 amma. And then you're going to make put up a wall of 3 amma. So you have a total of 5. Now, why would that count as a total of 5? Because of those 5 amma, the majority is standing. You have 3 ammas that are wall and 2 amma missing. So osapas sholosh ammas, and that would count as that would count like you have a 5 amma wall with a 2 amma door in there, and then the rest is a 10 amma opening, and it's fine. And if you had 2 of these, meaning if you had 20 amma wide wall, you could do 1 on either side. On each corner, the northwest corner and the southwest corner, you leave a gap of 2. You put up a board of 3 on either side. So now you've diminished the opening by 10 amma, leaving you only a 10 amma opening, and that's what our goal is, to have a 10 amma opening or less. So Gemara says, why do you have to do it this way? V'amai yasapas amma mechza. Why it would be more stable, perhaps, or it'd be easier. Why don't you just make a 1.5 amma board at the corners, at the corner itself, then leave a 2 amma gap, and then another 1.5. So why is it 2 and 3? Why can't it be 1.5, 2, and 1.5? And the Gemara is going to want to prove from here that what we see is that even though you have total majority of existent wall, but if each existent wall is smaller than the gap, that would not count. So even though you have a total of 3, but you have 1.5 and then a gap of 2 and then 1.5, each one of the boards are smaller than the gap and it won't count. So why can't you just make a 1.5 amma wall, so then a gap of 2, and then another a wall of 1.5? Shmamina, from here it seems to indicate that Amid Merubal Aparts, that even though that you have more wall than the breach, but nevertheless it's only in a total of 2 parts, but the gap is larger than either one of the parts alone. That doesn't count that it's a solid wall. So Gemara says, no, that's not true. That would count as a good wall. But over here, the issue is something else. There's a concept that if the standing wall is smaller than each of the gaps on its side, then it will be swallowed up by the gaps. In the suggestion of the Gemara, you have a wall of 1.5, then you have a gap of 2, and then you have a wall of 1.5 and a gap of 10. So the second 1.5 wall actually is absorbed by the gaps, because each one of the gaps, the 10 amma for sure, but even the gap of 2 is larger than the gap itself, than the beam itself of 1.5 amma. And therefore it'll be absorbed. And that's the concept of avira the haigisa, the air space, so the open space on one side, and the open side of avira the haigisa, and the open of the other side will swallow it up. In the Gemara's suggestion, the first suggestion, that's not the case. The reason for that is because there you have an actual wall of 3, and the gap is only 2 next to it. And therefore, that gap is not large enough to absorb the wall of 3. But if you have a gap of 2 and a wall of 1.5, then the gap is large enough to absorb the wall, since both sides of the wall are a gap larger than the wall itself.
I understand that the 1.5 and the 1.5 for the 2 in the middle. So we're going to say that the 1.5 and the 1.5 there's loved because of the 2.
Not
so
loved.
That's going to be
no loved. It's 2 amas. Loved is a max of 3 tefachim.
2 amas.
Right. We have to minimize the alleyway from 15 amma, let's say 25 feet, whatever, to 10 amma.
So why the construction of 1.5, 2, and 1.5? I don't get it.
Sorry.
What's the construction of 1.5?
We're trying to fill in the wall of 5 amas,
right,
on the opening side of the alleyway. So let's say on the west side.
So how does 2 combine with 1.5 and 1.5 if it's not loved?
Because it's amid merubal aparts. The majority of the wall is standing. I have 3 amma of standing wall, 2 amma of a breach. That's fine.
And we're going to ignore the 10.
Well, the 10 is my doorway.
Right.
I'm allowed a doorway.
But now we're saying no. We're going to add the 2 to the 10, so it's 1.5 can negative 12.
Correct. 1.5 to the 13.5, because you also have the 2 and the 1.5 independent wall gets absorbed. So you only have a wall of 1.5.
So the freestanding wall gets absorbed. It's not even there.
Correct, because the airspace that envelops it on both sides is larger. Each one alone is larger than the wall itself, and that gets absorbed.
Got it. So that's nothing. It's just
Correct.
a stick.
It's non-existent. So the Gemara says, okay, so then why don't we make 1 amma gaps and 1 amma beams? V'yasa pas amma. Let him make a beam of 1 amma, v'yachik amma, and a gap of an amma, v'yasa pas amma, and another beam of an amma, v'yachik amma, and a gap of an amma, v'yasa pas amma, and another beam of an amma. And here you can't tell me that the last beam would be absorbed by the opening on both sides, because the gap is the same and therefore it won't absorb it. But nevertheless, what I should learn from here is Shemamina Amid Kapar, it's us that if the standing wall is the same size as the gaps, that it would not count as a valid wall. So the Gemara says, mutter. And I say, no, that would count as a good wall, and that would make it permissible to carry within there. That still we're going to say that the airspace can absorb the last beam, because even when it's exactly the same size, the beam, the solid has to be larger than the airspace on at least one of its sides in order not to be absorbed by the vacuum, by the airspace on the side of it. In order to count as a wall, it must be that the wall itself is larger than the side next to it, at least one side next to it. So the Gemara says, okay, so v'yachik ama v'yasa pas ama umechza. So let him take an initial gap of 1 amma, then a beam of 1.5, and then a gap of an amma, and then another beam of 1.5, and that would work instead of doing a 2 amma gap and a 3 amma beam. So that indeed would work, because the standing wall is larger than the gap, and then each one of the gaps, and combined it is larger than the gaps, because it's a 5 amma space, a 5 amma wall with a total of 3 ammas standing and 2 ammas of gap. But nevertheless, that's more difficult to do, because you're making 2 walls stand rather than a 2 gap and 3 amma wall. And the Chachamim did not give a scenario that makes it more difficult. Of course, it would be valid if you did so for whatever reason, but it's not necessary. And now the Gemara says, so, well, if you have an opening of 10, and that's your doorway, and that's why you're allowed a gap of 10, and then you have this wall that also has a gap in it, a wall of 5 that has a gap of 2, maybe people are going to leave the main entrance and go through your gap of 2 amma, which is about 3 feet, and people are going to shortcut through there, and then eventually it ruins the doorway and the opening. And we saw that this concern existed earlier, where we saw that there was a gap somewhere on the sidewall that we said that there was a maximum size for that before we're concerned that that's going to be a breach. And maybe they'll leave the large opening and come into start using the small opening. No, we're not concerned that someone's going to go through a small opening instead of the larger main opening. So I says, wait, but we saw earlier Rabami Baravasi, they did have that concern depending on what size, but they had that concern. Rabami Baravasi. Hasam, there it's off to the side, so it's a shortcut. It's on the side wall. You don't have to go all the way to the west and then come around. You could just cut through the north or south wall. But over here, it's all on the western wall. You're coming out from the same side. You're coming out 3 feet over one side. You're not going to go through a narrower, smaller opening just for that. Tanan Hasam. So in regards to a larger gap than the space itself, we're going to come into a question of Tuma as well. They would have essentially a toilet seat. It's called an asla. It was basically a leather seat, a leather cloth over some stands, and the size over here is really small. So I don't know what function it would have, but the question was in regards to Tuma, whether it counts as a valid space to cover for it Tuma. So Tanan Asim, we looked over there in the Mishnah. Or ha'asla, this leather seat, okay? V'chalal shaloi, even though that it has a hole in its center, that hole will not diminish the tefach size, the minimum tefach size of that material, and it's going to count as a solid in regards to whatever tumas ames, whatever tuma is beneath it, will be transferred by the covering. My or asla. So what is this cover? What is this seat? It's the toilet seat. Makama. And how much of a gap is there? Also Rabdimi Amar Etzba'ayim. It's 2 fingers. Mikan, Ve'etzba'ayim Mikan, and 2 fingers on the other side. Ve'etzba'ayim Revach, and 2 fingers of the hole in the middle. So it's a total of 6 finger breadths, 2 of leather on either side, and the hole in the middle is 2 finger breadths. Kiyasa Ravin, however, when Ravin came, Amar Etzba Mechza Mekan Mechza Mechza Mekan Ve'etzba Revach Be'emtza. And when Ravin came from Eretz Yisrael, so he would travel from academy to academy, from Bavel to Eretz Yisrael and back, and he said that it's 1.5 finger breadths on either side and a finger breadth hole in the middle. Amar le Abaye le Ravdimi, and Abaye asked Ravdimi, when he would travel back and forth, and he was in Bavel, so he asked him, "Mi Palgisu, are you disagreeing with Ravin, who said 1.5, and you're saying 2?" I'm talking about smaller fingers, and he's talking about larger, because the tefach is either 5. A tefach would be either 4 thumbs or 5 fingers or 6 pinkies. So I was talking about the 6 fingers, so that I'm talking about 6. So that's 3 and 3. So 2 and 2, 2 times 3, 2 of solid on either side, and 1 in the middle, and 2 in the middle. He's talking about 5 thumbs, and so it's going to. It's 4 thumbs, so it's 1.5 on either side, and a solid finger, and 1 of the hole in the middle. So it's just the measure that they were talking about was a different measure, but it's either way, it's a tefach total. The Gemara said, really, and that's not a machlokes. So, but we are disagreeing in another theory, in another concept, and that's this question of when you have more solid space, meaning the leather is larger than the hole itself. Mishtei ruchas pagisu. Does on both sides. That's a machlokes. Lididcha have oimid mishtei ruchas l'ravin miruach achad have oimid mishtei ruchas le'ave oimid. This that you, if you have the exact amount of solid space over the opening, can it be equal on both sides, or is it only going to be valid if it's equal on one side, but the other side is larger? And that's why he said that it needs to be 1.5 on either side, and the gap is only 1. Whereas, according to Ravin, it can be 2 and 2 on either side, and 2 in the middle, and nevertheless, it'll count as a solid. Because if you're going to say that we disagree, the Ravin have well, then according to Ravin, he should have said that they were exactly the same. Even though we're talking about 4, he could have said that it's 1 1/3 each. So therefore, the fact that he said it's 1.5 on either side and 1 in the middle tells you that he would not agree that it would be a halachically completely solid space if you had 1.5 finger breadths on one side, 1 1/3 on one side and 1 1/3 in the other, and 1 1/3 in the middle, meaning that that the hole was the same exact size as the solid space on either side. That would not count as completely closed because the hole is the same as the sides, and you'd need the sides to be larger, at least one of the sides to be larger than the hole. So if you do disagree, according to me, this is what it should have said. Etzba ushtei shlishim mikan. I could have said that it's a finger breadth and 2/3 are here. Ve'etzba shnei shlishim mikan. Ve'etzba ayim shnei shlishim revach. And then if the two sides can be wider, that it can be the same size as the hole itself, then I should have also said such a scenario where the gap is large enough that it equals the total of the two sides. So rather, the question is not whether the two sides have to equal the whole, but rather if each side is alone, is the same size as the gap, can it still be considered that more is standing than not, and it counts as a solid. So again, we have three possibilities here. We can say that the total gap and the total solid can be equal, and that would count as a wall or it's enclosed. And to that, we say that everybody agrees that would not count. We can have that each side individually is equal to the gap, and that would count as completed wall, and that's what Ravin is saying. And then we have that's what Rav Dimi was saying, and Ravin is saying that no, it has to be that each one of the walls itself are larger than the gap in order for it to count as a solid on account of that it's larger than the gap itself. If you have a doorway, that would be sufficient even if the opening is larger than 10. So meaning, up until now, we were just talking about that there was a gap, there was no wall at all at the opening. And then the maximum that you can have is 10 amma. According to the Chachamim, Yehuda would say that it can be larger. Whereas if you actually have a doorway, which we said was the frame of a door, 2 vertical posts and a horizontal directly above it, that would be a doorway, and then your doorway can be even larger than 10 ammas. So we have a doorway that would allow you to have even a wider opening. And a nice cross beam that catches people's eyes can be even taller than 20. Taller than 20. What about if it's the other way around? And now we go to Yud Aleph Amud Aleph 11a. If I have it the other way around, what would be the halacha? If I had a doorway for the height, let's say my alleyway walls are 30 amma high, let's say 50 feet, and now I want to enclose that. I don't want to bring the cross beam down. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to create a doorway in there. Does that count? So the Brisa says it this way: if you have an alleyway that is the entrance is taller than 20 amma, you have to bring it down. However, if you put in a door frame and it's you don't have to bring it down. So you see that a door frame works even for higher than 20 amma alleyway or entrance. What about the other way around? If you have a very nice eye-catching beam as your width to minimize the width, Tashama, the Brisa says that if it's taller than 20 amma, you have to bring it down. And also if it's too wide, more than 10 amma, you have to narrow it. And if you have a door frame, then you don't have to minimize it. And as well, if you have a eye-catching, beautiful beam, that also you don't have to minimize it. My lava safer, wouldn't you say that's going on both when it's too tall or when it's too wide? La ratio. No, perhaps that's only going on the first case where above you have a cross beam that's eye-catching. That's going to be sufficient. Rav Yehuda taught to Chia Barav, Kamei the Rav, in front of Rav, Ain't it tzarich hamayim? Like our Mishnah, that if you have a doorway, once the doorway is 10 amos, even if it's wider than 10 amos, as long as you have the door frame, and you don't have to minimize it. Amalei asnei tzarich hamayim. So Rav said to him, actually, that's not the correct text. The text of Mishnah, the way you should teach my son, is that you do have to minimize it. A door frame does not help in minimizing the width of a doorway, of the door frame. The max it can be is 10 amos and no more. Well, from this teaching, we can learn that if you have a courtyard whose wall is made up of windows and doors on all sides, so right now there's more gaps than the standing wall, even though that it counts as a wall in each spot. But because you have the windows and you have the doors, the totality of it is majority of gaps and openings. It would not count as a wall, even if you have a door frame in the doorway. My time, since you say that in the entrance to an alleyway, where the max it could be is 10 amos, more than that is going to be invalid. And paras merubah, and if you had more space than solid wall, that also invalidates it by a chutzah, by a courtyard. Just as by the opening of the alleyway where it's larger than 10, it's invalid. And even if you put in a door frame, it's not going to help. So too in the courtyard, where the majority where you need a majority of solid wall, and if you have a majority of it as space, openings, it's not going to it's going to be invalid. That invalidation of the wall is not going to be helped by a door frame either. The Gemara says no. Perhaps there's a distinction. Maybe there is a distinction, because if you remember yesterday we talked about making these corner beams around the well, and we said the max size over there for the gap is 13 1/3 amma, and that was according to Rabbi Yehuda. However, Rabbi Meir says that over there the max is 10 amma, and so perhaps just as by pasei biros, by these beams around the well, according to Rabbi Meir the max is 10 amma. So too the opening of an alleyway, the max is 10 amma, and therefore if you have it any larger, a door frame won't work. And just as it wouldn't work, the gap of 10 ammas wouldn't work, larger than 10 wouldn't work for a well. So but by a well, everybody, both Rabbi Meir and Rabbi Yehuda, agree that the gap by a well is larger than the wall itself. All you have is 1 amma at each end, and so, which gives you really a total of 8 amma. And the gaps are definitely larger than that, and yet it works. So maybe by a courtyard, the stringency that we have, that it has to be mostly solid wall, is not going to be that strict, that if you have less than mostly solid wall, meaning you have more gaps because of the windows and the doorways, but you have a door frame, that'll permit it. So let's say that we can support the opinion of Rav, that the opinion of Rabbi Yosef, who says that according to Rav, a door frame would not help a gap in a courtyard wall if the gaps are larger than the solid. So again, we have the opening of an alleyway. It must be 10 or less. If it's larger, the text of our Mishnah says a door frame would help. Otherwise, it must be narrowed. Rav says, no, a door frame will not help because the gap can be a max 10 and a door frame will not make it more door than that. And Rav Yosef says the same should be true for a courtyard, which has to have mostly solid wall. And if it has gaps in the wall that total larger than the solid of the wall, it's going to be an invalid courtyard wall. And there too, Rav Yosef says, and adding a door frame to the doorway will not minimize those gaps. So let's say we have a support to that. The fanas alol sharuba besachem achalonis muter walls, that the majority of them are openings and windows, is going to be permissible. As long as the majority is standing wall. So they said that's self-contradictory. You said the majority, a wall that has majority gaps of windows and doors is going to be valid as long as there's the majority of solid over the windows and walls. So the Gemara said, "Sharuban sakadaita." Can it be that it means the majority is walls and openings? Because then you won't have more solid. What it means is, if you have a lot of windows and doors, it'll nevertheless only be kosher as a wall of a courtyard if it has more solid than gaps. By the way, I should clarify that when I say windows, I don't mean with glass in it or window panes. It means holes in the wall that they would look out of. And therefore, it has to be.
I was wondering about that, but if you open the windows, then it would be, right?
Well, if you had actual windows, so there you're allowed to open the door, and that's a proper door. We saw that earlier. If it's made to open and close, then even when it's open, it's considered closed. But they didn't have glass like we have, so their holes were not. They were just holes in the wall.
We saw before they had like I think the stuff to close it up with.
Correct, but it was in your alley. That was for the house. In the alleyway, in your courtyard, they'd have holes they'd make brick walls or whatever it was, and you'd have a doorway and you'd have a window. You have holes for windows
in the walls of the mavoi
of the courtyard of the chutzner.
I know, but the chutzner's got a wall around it, right?
Right. The courtyard has a wall around it, and it has multiple doorways and multiple windows. As long as the solid is more than the open, it's going to count as
well. I'm saying that we're talking about the wall of the chutzner, or we're talking about the wall of the house.
No, the wall of the chutzner of the courtyard.
The wall of the chutzner.
Amar of Kahana. So Rav Kahana said no. Of course, you can have windows and doors. Over here, we're talking about improper doorways or improper windows. My Pischa Shemai. What does it mean that it's improper? Pligi Rachumi Barav Yosef, and there's a machlokes why these are not proper windows. One says that it doesn't have really sides. That basically you just knocked out a few bricks, and so you still have one row of brick, and then a gap of a half a brick beneath it, and then a row of brick, and then another half a gap beneath it. So you don't have. It's not a framed window. You just knocked out a few bricks and made that hole. But it's still, the sides are still jagged on account of the stones or bricks from each row. One says no, it's a gap that you just knocked it all out and it doesn't have a top. So you just knocked out a section and there's a window there, but it doesn't have the top of a window frame, or there's a door there, but he doesn't have a top of a door frame. That's where it's going to count as a gap and not count as a solid. But if you have a proper door frame and you have a proper window frame, then that would count as a solid wall. V'av Rabbi Yochanan Savar Lo the Rav, and Rabbi Yochanan also follows the opinion of Rav that a door frame will not work to minimize the more than 10 gap at the opening of your alleyway. There was a story from somebody that lived out in the plains of Beis Chivrasa. He had a vineyard, and at the four corners of the vineyard, he put up some beams. And then over those beams, he pulled some vines across from one beam to the other, and essentially made a four door frames as his border of his vineyard, and then that would allow him to plant vegetables on the side of it. Because as we've seen before, as long as you have a fence or a wall between your vineyard and your vegetables, you can put you can plant your vegetables or your wheat directly up to the wall, and because you just need a visual demarcation. And over here, he's made a door frame, and that counts as a wall. And he's made the door frame out of the vines, but nevertheless, you have a post, a vine across, and a post. That's a door frame. And the story came before the Chachamim, and they said, so it's going to be permissible, and it won't count as mixed seeds if you plant your wheat on the side of that vineyard. And Rabbi Shlokish said, just as it was permissible in regards to mixed seeds, so too it's going to be permissible in regards to Shabbos, and that's going to count as a valid door frame. But Rabbi Yochanan says no, they did not permit it for Shabbos, only for Kollel. But so now we're going to try and figure out what are we talking about? Where is this machlokas based upon? That Rish Lakish says it counts even for Shabbos, and Rabbi Yochanan says it does not. Do we say that the vertical post, that the vine that runs across was not above the vertical posts, but rather it was off to its side? That everybody agrees doesn't count as a tzuras HaPesach. That doesn't count as a tzuras HaPesach, as we've been saying the whole time. A door frame, by definition, means that the lintel, which is the top crossbeam of your door frame, must be above the two posts and not in front of it, not off to its side. Ella al gaban. So it must be that the vine went above the two posts. So then why would Rabbi Yochanan say it's not valid? If it's 10 amos or long or less, would Rabbi Yochanan say that's not valid? For sure we know a door frame made of a crossbeam on top, or here a vine on top, and two side posts, up to 10 amos, everybody agrees is a proper door frame and would count as a wall for Shabbos. So must be we're talking about that it's larger than 10. And therefore, that's why Reish Lakish says it's okay. Rabbi Yochanan says it's not okay. And that would say that Rabbi Yochanan concurs with Rav, who said that you cannot minimize the opening of an alleyway if it's larger than 10 by putting in a door frame. Because a door frame max can be 10 amos wide, 15 amos wide. So Gemara says, no, maybe we're talking about that it was less than 10. And really, we're talking about that it was off to the side, meaning what the vine wasn't directly above the posts, but rather in front of the posts. And Reish Lakish disagrees with Rav Chisda and says that's also a good doorpost, a door frame. The door frame doesn't have to be directly above. In front is okay. And Rabbi Yochanan says no, it must be above. But then we would have a contradiction between them, Rabbi Yochanan himself and Reish Lakish himself. Because Rabbi Reish Lakish said in the name of Rabbi Yehuda bar Chanina. Now we go to 11b. Peya muteres le'ini kalai. Having a vine run across posts to create a door frame is going to count as a good door frame and a divider between your vineyard and your vegetables or grains. Avaloi Shabbos, but it won't count as a barrier for Shabbos, which is contradictory to what he just said before. Rabbi Yochanan k'mechitzas l'Shabbos, and Rabbi Yochanan says no, it counts just as it counts as a border for Shabbos. So too it's going to count as a wall for Shabbos. So too it's going to count as a border of your vineyard for mixed seed. Or just as it doesn't work for Shabbos, so too it won't work for Kilayim for your vineyard. Now the Gemara says Bishlam or the Rish Lakish, other Rish Lakish Lakash. For Rish Lakish, I could say Hadi Dei Hadi Rabbi. This is his own opinion, and this is his teacher's opinion. That he was when he was quoting Rabbi Yehuda Rabbi Chanina. That's his teacher said that it doesn't work for Shabbos, but he himself holds that it does work for Shabbos. Ela de Rabbi Yochanan and Rabbi Yochanan. By Rabbi Yochanan, we have a question. Kasha. Now, so if we explain, well, one is talking about that it's above, and therefore it's a good door frame, but it's larger than 10, and so therefore it's going to count for your vineyard, but not for Shabbos. That makes sense. But if you tell me that both of them are talking about that it's off to the in front of it, and that's not going to be a good doorway, so then why is it good in regards to the mixed seeds over in the first brisa? So Gemara says, no, I can tell you that they're both up in front. And one is talking about that it's larger than 10, so it won't work for your vineyard or for Shabbos. And one is talking about that it's up in front, but it's less than 10 amas. So for your vineyard, it's going to count, but for Shabbos, it must be directly above. And how do we know that there's a distinction between if the opening is larger than 10 amas, that it can't count as a door frame, but if it's within 10 amas, it counts as a door frame? Rabbi Yochanan said to Rish Lakish, wasn't the story that Yeshua went to study by Rabbi Yochanan ben Nuri, Limud Torah? And now, even though Rabbi Yeshua himself was well versed in the laws of mixed seeds, nevertheless he asked this question of Matzah Sheyeshu ben Ilanis. He found that they were sitting amongst trees, and that they pulled a vine from one tree to another tree to make this door frame. If there were vines, grapevines over here on this side, can I plant on the other side? And he said to him, if there's a max of 10 amma, then you'd be allowed to plant there because that's the max of a door frame. But if it's larger, the door frame is larger than 10, you're not going to be allowed to plant there. And now, what was that scenario? Did the vine go above the trees or the trunk? Why would 10 be larger than 10? Why would it be prohibited? If he had these posts, basically they come to a point so you could stick it into the ground and it's solid above, and he pulled and he pulled a vine above from one end to the other. That even if it's larger than 10 for a vineyard, you're going to be allowed. That's going to count as a good barrier between your vineyard and your grains. Must be that it was off to the side. And then he says max 10 is going to work, more than that not. So you see that even by a vineyard where we're lenient, they said that the vine can go up in front and it doesn't have to go directly above. That's only going to be up to 10 amos, but more than that, it would not be permissible. But for Shabbos, either way, it's not going to be valid unless the door frame is made with a vertical post directly above the two. The lintel, the horizontal beam, goes directly above the two vertical posts, and then it's going to be a solid wall for Shabbos, a doorway for Shabbos. Otherwise, not Shema Mina. Indeed, that's a good proof. As Hashem, tomorrow morning we'll continue with this idea of door frames and minimizing a gap with the door frame, with the vertical post, and with the lintel, the horizontal beam, directly above the vertical post. Kesser starts davening right now. It is Rosh Chodesh.